the skies. By the way, if you're a history buff, one of the co-authors of that song, a man named Alger Pace, who wrote something like 400 songs. He was a main figure on the gospel singing circuit. He sang bass, and he wrote lots of songs, and so that's his legacy to the world. But today what we're looking at Leviticus 25. We'll maybe end up looking at Luke chapter 4. Our goal is to look at God's ways and thoughts, what he thinks is important, particularly in relation to the Sabbath, and not the Sabbath day that we're familiar with, but the Sabbath year, and what that was, and how that relates to Jesus' ministry. And then finally, how Leviticus 25 relates to us and our future. And we'll spend a couple of weeks on this. Today, we'll be looking at the Sabbath years, what they were. And then next week, our main focus will be the Jubilees and how that affected Christ's ministry and our lives as Christians. The goal of Sabbath. It was not a new set of rules for a special day. It was supposed to be a day of rest, principle of restoration, release. Those are all happy things. Sometimes we think Christ came to do away with the Sabbath, that the Sabbath was a pointless, legalistic day, and Jesus came just to throw sand in the face of the Sabbath. He deliberately broke Sabbath rules as it was understood by the leaders of his day, that he did it to just blow up the Sabbath. That's not true, if you just think about it. Who devised the Sabbath? It was God. And Jesus, many people think Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. Jesus is Jehovah. Our theologians can debate that, and we don't know. Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. It's safe to say that Jesus devised the Sabbath. So when Jesus came and got onto some of the Sabbath rules, healed on the Sabbath, ate grain on the Sabbath, he was teaching them what the Sabbath is really supposed to be. He's not saying the Sabbath is a bad thing. He's saying here's what the Sabbath needs to be. Sabbath day and the Sabbath year, as we will see. First of all, what is a Sabbath year? Just like the Sabbath was a day, it was a year. Every seventh year, everything essentially shut down, as everything shut down every seventh day. And what does Sabbath mean? It really is from a word meaning to rest or to cease or break time or intermission, whatever word you want to use there. That's the principle. God planned a time for rest and to reset, a time to step back out of a busy routine. And he set the example for that in creation, created the earth in 6 days. The seventh day he rested. God said, let me show you how to do it. I did my work 6 days. Then I ceased. I took a break. I stepped back. He gave the law of the Sabbath on a weekly basis just to make sure the Jews didn't get wrapped into what the pagan world did. And that was working, making, doing 7 days a week. So many people in China today complain about they work 7 days a week. And they work incredible hours, constant work. The idea was you just worked your servant as much as you could until they just dropped. You worked yourself. God says, no, you cut that out 1 day a week. We can fall into that same mindset today. There's a scourge of activity today, if you think about it. Hits our families really hard. Children, their parents are expected to go here and do this and do that 7 days a week now, of rehearsals and practices and meetings. You run inside to the refrigerator with a bunch of things scheduled. You grab a snack. What's today? You run out the door. That's too busy. I remember when even Wednesday nights were sort of sacrosanct. I remember one time, years ago, Bill Malone was coaching a little league team, and somebody got revolutionary. They scheduled a ball game for a Wednesday afternoon, evening. And Bill just said, no, cancel it. We forfeit the game. We're not doing that. Our kids go to church. And now that's all over. I mean, everyone, they have games 7 days a week now. Sunday's not a problem. Sunday morning is a great time for sports activities, for all kinds of things. I saw that happen at work. When I started, you didn't do things on Sunday. But then this one organization and then others, I was unfortunately a part of it, they started just deliberately scheduling things on Sundays because, hey, that's a free day. Well, not from God's economy. Earlier generations had what they called the Christian Sabbath. They called Sunday the Christian Sabbath. We don't have blue laws anymore protect us. We got to kind of look out for ourselves there. We don't have that wall of protection around our schedules. But if we just go with the flow, there will be no rest. Someone is planning something for you every day of the week. And if you have children, grandchildren, I guarantee you someone is lying awake at night planning what they can do at some point of the week with your child. We don't want to turn Sunday into another day of on-the-go activities. We don't want that to happen. An idle mind's the devil's workshop. We all know that. And a biblical rest, and I'm not arguing necessarily for a return to a Christian Sabbath, but a day of rest. It's not a day of rest to have more time to scroll the internet, and it's not an argument for more beach time. That's really not what I think God had in mind. What was the Sabbath about? Well, if you look at what Orthodox Jewish families do today, you get a glimpse. I think they're keeping that mindset. It was a day spent with the family at home, big meal, extended family, sitting around and talking, parents telling stories, children listening as their parents and friends talk, as parents and grandparents talk. It's amazing how much kids learn just by listening to old stories, and they love to hear them. That's what the Sabbath was. It was a day, of course, for going to the synagogue, and even today, Jews will go to synagogue, and the Orthodox will go back on the Sabbath evening for another service, the way we do on Sunday evening services. It was a day of a break from making money, thinking about money, a day to think about and spend with family, with God, learning His will, developing relationships. We live in a day that values activity and productivity. They're important, but those things are not God's priority. Activity and productivity, they are not God's priority. The Sabbath teaches that. So the Sabbath opens the door, gives us a glimpse into what God values, what God wants us to spend our time doing and thinking and being about. That's sort of the general Sabbath idea in the Sabbath day. But let's get to the Sabbath year, which is what Leviticus 25 is about. Chapter 25, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 days sow your fields. For 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards." Whoa, a year-long break from work? Should we take off every 7th year? They didn't entirely stop doing. They were active, but they were not plowing and planting and harvesting and all of those things. We won't go through and read all the verses. This is a summary of what happened. No crops were planted. In the 6th year, you saved seeds for year 8. Year 7, you didn't plant. You didn't prune vines. Okay. I think that probably included fruit trees. They grew different kinds of citrus and things. Don't trim your fruit trees. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and modern agricultural science says, let your fields lie fallow. And we got a few acres behind the house that we rent. It's never lain fallow. Every year they plow it and churn it up and pour some fertilizer on it. And Jamie Weisbeck used to complain bitterly about that. He said, that's just draining the land, you know. Even agricultural scientists, let it lie fallow. But no. God said, do that. They didn't mention livestock. Exodus, I think it's 21, I think is the chapter, says that you could eat, and it said you were commanded to eat the oldest born males, offers a sacrifice, and then you and the family ate. If you had a deformed animal, you were to kill them, eat them, but you let the poor eat it as well. You had like just a general food for everyone to eat. Of course, you had milk and cheese. That came in every year, so I'm sure they were still milking goats that just had to be milked, but no planting and harvesting. So what did you eat? Well, you had to save up. Grain, vegetables, dried figs, saved cheese, saved grain. You had to save ahead. Think about the economic repercussions of that. That means you could not live on credit because you had no income, in their understanding of income, 1 year out of 7. That means you had to save up for 6 years and then use it that 7th to do things besides just make stuff. You and the poor, you could eat the stuff that volunteered, and every field had its volunteers coming up. You could eat that. You were supposed to let the poor eat it as well, and it was available to everyone. You could not harvest it. You could not sell it. So you didn't trim your vines, but there'll be some grapes. So you and any poor people can eat the grapes, and the same thing with the citrus and all of that. So that's what they did. Isaiah 58:6 calls the Sabbath year a fast. And that's what it was. It was a fast. You didn't indulge yourself with a whole bunch of everything because you had no income. You were saving up and then eating sparingly for that year. What was the point of a Sabbath year? I read a lot of commentaries, different answers. One theory is it taught trust in God. It took a lot of trust in God to say, it's time to plant. The rains are starting to come in. I'm going to just sit here on my hands and I'm not going to go plant. That took some trust in God. It took a lot of trust. I think about those people who quit their jobs and went to New Zealand. That took an act of faith. I'm quitting my job and I'm going over here and I'll have some support, but that's a fast. And you have faith that when I come back, I will have work and things will turn out right. So trust in God, one message. The second message, remember the Exodus. Everybody, from the richest to the poorest, is really going to live much like they did during the Exodus. You're going to be picking whatever volunteers on the side of the road or in somebody else's field. You're going to be eating some dried figs and some cheese. It's going to be a time of leanness. Another person said, and this is some Jewish sources, says, it's to remind you of what it's like to be needy. Everybody gets to experience a fast. That makes you more sympathetic to those who really do have need when you do have more, when you're making more. But this Sabbath year, it's a time, it's an opportunity, it's a command to say enough is enough. It's time to curb my appetite. I don't have to have one more of this or one more of that. My appetite for profit, got to curb it. My appetite for the finest things, got to curb it. My appetite for more and more savings, my appetite to watch my savings account grow. You got to curb that appetite. The fast of the Sabbath year. It increased sympathy and self-control. Our culture says enjoy now, spend now, earn it later. Don't delay anything. Don't restrict your lifestyle. And this was what it was all about. But what did you do during that year? So you didn't plant and harvest. So what did you do? That was a year to be spent in religious instruction. You had more time, more leisure to devote to learning God's Word. So they certainly did that. It was a time to do honeydews. Historically, some archaeologists say they can trace about every 7 years terraces being rebuilt where they terrace the land and put in the soil. They spent that year preparing for the next year. But all those things you couldn't do when you were busy planting, they did all of those things. They were making and sharpening and preparing their tools, and they were taking care of those things. It was a year for new priorities. What we try to cram into that week between Christmas and New Year's when we make resolutions and those kind of things, it was a whole year to sort of take stock. Where am I going? What do I want to do? What are my plans? What can I do? What should I do? Men things. It's a year for that. What I would have given for that in my busiest years. I'm in retirement now. But wow, a year just to step out of all of that pressure and to have time to do those things. So the land received a rest. Very important. The fallow year. By the way, this is another footnote. It's not in my notes, but I was reading about how Jews handled the Sabbath year. People are always getting creative. Some Jewish people, this was not in the environments in the ancient world, but in other areas, they would sell their property to a friendly Gentile for 1 year so they could keep farming it because they didn't own it now. The Gentile owned it. And then they'd buy it back. And another plan that some people used, they would divide their land into 7 parts, and every year it would lie fallow, 1/7 would. So the land would get a Sabbath over the course of 7 years, but not in the 7th year. And all of that was people trying to get creative and go around they just couldn't, they didn't have the faith, I guess. But the land received a rest, but that's not all. At the end of, this is from Deuteronomy, also talking about the Sabbath year. At the end of every 7 years, the Sabbath year, you shall grant a release. And this is the manner of the release. Every creditor shall release what he has lent to his neighbor. He shall not exact it of his neighbor, his brother, because the Lord's release has been proclaimed. Don't go knock on his door. Don't go threaten to take his motorcycle. I mean, that's it. Of a foreigner you may exact it, but whatever of yours is with your brother, your hand shall release. Anybody borrowed anything from you? It was over in the 7th year. Ooh, release from debt. Think about that. That means their economy and the economy God devised wasn't a purely capitalistic economy. Pure capitalism, unrestricted capitalism, is individualistic. It says life is about each individual accumulating as much as they can and then investing that as wisely as they can in terms of making stuff or buying and selling stuff or whatever it is, and then getting as much return as they can. And capitalism has its good points. When it is tempered with compassion and fairness and kindness, capitalism, life is about making as much as you can and investing that. It can lift all boats. But the problem is when capitalism gets mixed up with greed and deceit and corruption. We talk about crony capitalism sometimes. Others exploitative kinds of capitalism, where the idea is to make as much as you can and squeeze as much as you can out of anybody you can, and that's an evil, godless kind of capitalism. And so God's plan says, yes, make and invest, but then you had the Sabbath year, and then you did forgive debts. The point is, if capitalism is bad, there's a giant sucking sound of the haves sucking wealth away from the have-nots. Exorbitant interest, inflated prices, all that stuff going on. So capitalism is good when and only it's in the hands of good people. That's the truth. So That doesn't mean Israel was socialistic. That's another option that the current world gives us, socialism. Socialism is based on the idea that I or my friends over here, they know better how to spend your money than you do. And we have the right, because of our superior virtue, our superior whatever, we have the right to take your stuff and to give it to the people that we think deserve it. And you know how that works? Usually, the people they take it from is you, and the people they give it to is us. And it's another giant sucking sound, taking advantage of people. Seize everyone's access in the name of the greater good and then distribute them fairly to themselves, of course, as it goes. The Sabbath as an economic system totally opposed to all of that. Give time to families for rest. It didn't let people work themselves to death 7 days a week, year-round, every year. It said, you got to stop. You got to take a break. You got to step out of it. It didn't let me work my employees 7 days a week, year-round, and just grind them into the ground either. God's plan says, no, it's not about getting as much as you can any way that you can. So what was this economy designed to do? It was designed to ensure the survival and the cohesion of the community. It wasn't about me making as much as I can. It was the community surviving together. Form a strong society. Everybody has a place and has rights, as we will see. Poverty is a temporary state. It's not a permanent state, as we'll see. Even the poorest are treated with dignity. They're not ground down. It's a place where free will and not force prevents extreme wealth and extreme poverty. And the fact that this whole Sabbath law even existed was based on the idea that Israel is God's land. All of you are just renters. The richest, the poorest. This is mine. It's all mine. I'll let you use it. You have to use it in the way I tell you. And that's the way it works. So release from debt every 7 years. By the way, if you lent money to a fellow Jew, that was just principal. No interest could be charged. You did not charge interest. Exodus 22:25 says, if you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not be like a money lender. Charge him no interest. You could charge foreigners interest. In our world, if you're giving money to a Christian, loaning them money to a Christian, member of your church, that was to be without interest. I'm just loaning you this because you need it. So why would you ever lend money? Not to make money. You didn't lend money to make money. You lent money in this system to help out others, those who needed help. But what about the liars and the cheaters and the grifters who are out there going to borrow something from you knowing if they hold out long enough they won't have to pay you back? What about those folks? Verse 7 of Deuteronomy 15. If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within your land that the Lord is giving to you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year, the year of release, is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing. And he cry out to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. Wow. Even if you're 6 months away from Jubilee, the 7th year rather, the Sabbath year, and your neighbor has need, give it to him. You're sure you're not going to get it back, but give it anyway. Several things we need to say here. Number one, God is not advocating naivete or gullibility. When it talks about giving to your brother, it's within this context. It's in the context of a Jewish village where everybody knew everybody else's business. It's not talking about if somebody walks up to you in the parking lot and says, brother, can you spare me a dime? it's not talking about that kind of giving. There's a place for that, and that's a good thing. But it's talking about you know who has a need, and in that case, you are to give it. You live close. You knew who was really poor, who was really suffering, who wasn't. You knew if your neighbor got kicked by a bull and was laid up with a broken leg and couldn't work, you knew that. And so you knew that he needed help. You knew that if he and his wife and his 10-year-old son were trying to make the crop with a hoe because the ox died, you knew that. He says, lend, help out. You knew the situation. This was personal giving. There was no overhead cost. He wasn't saying, give 30% of all that you own to the judges, and they'll decide who gets what and all this kind of thing. That aggravated me when I was at work. You could accumulate sick days, and I accumulated quite a few sick days. And there was a particular person, she was a member of the church, who was sick, couldn't work, and had used all of her sick leave. I wanted to give her some of my sick leave. No, that's not the way it works. You can't do that. You can't designate. You give the sick days to us, and we will decide who gets them. I said, I'll just keep my sick days, thank you. This was personal. You gave to the person who was in need, and you knew where it went and for what purpose it went. So that's the situation, what it was like. The money was supposed to be repaid. This was an honor system. You gave without interest, and it was your obligation morally to God to pay it back. Some loans weren't repaid. We know that. But God thought of that before you. Verse 10 of the same chapter in Deuteronomy 15, you shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him. God loves a cheerful giver. Did you wonder where that came from? Straight from Leviticus. Don't be grudging. Give to him cheerfully. Because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all you undertake. You don't trust on the interest rate to give you money back, and you don't entrust in these other things. God will bless you. Will bring it back. We'll hold those verses for later. We'll move ahead while we can. Okay, so this Sabbath year turns some of our prevailing notions about the economy on its head. Your employees can only work 6 days a week. There goes 14% of the work week. You're obligated to loan money without interest. Wow, there goes a source of income. What am I supposed to do? And you have to erase what you do loan, the principal you loan. You have to erase that debt every 7 years, no matter how far in arrears someone may be. So how do you make money? You make money by doing the right thing. If you will live right, if you will care for the poor neighbor, God will take care of you. What a system. And we say, that's not realistic. We're not the first ones to say that. The ancient Israelites said that too, as we will see in just a minute. But that's God's economy. Do the right thing, and God will take care of you. The poor will be with you always. Many righteous people have suffered downtimes in poverty. It's an opportunity for those who have to share and to give. But the key to wealth, God's economy says, is compassion and care. And true wealth is stored up in heaven, not on earth. When you gave to the poor, God said, I'll bless you. I want you to do that. I'm telling you to do that. And I'll take care of you. But he says your real treasure is stored up in heaven. And Jesus said, whenever you give someone something as small as a cup of water, you've given it to me. So whatever you give to someone, if they can't pay you back under this system, you had given that to God. That was your treasure laid up in heaven. So that's one of the lessons of the Sabbath year. Let's move on. I always go a little bit too slow here. There's one more thing that happened this year. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. Now, why would one Hebrew sell himself or a family member to another Hebrew? Well, sometimes the financial need was bigger than a charitable gift would tide you over. It was a big problem, a chronic problem. Maybe there was just some mismanagement there, and you were in just a tight spot. And it was not a temporary thing where a small loan or even a large loan could get you through. In that case, the option was to sell yourself as a slave. But slavery within the Jewish community was not like any other kind of slavery in the world. You were not a piece of a piece of property to be commanded and mistreated and beaten like an army mule if the owner. So you were a fellow Hebrew, and what you did when you sold yourself, you said, I will work for you. If you'll feed me, I will just work for you until I pay off my debt. And so that's how it went. Or if I can't do it, I will. If you'll pay my debt for me to someone else, I will just work for you. That's what it was like. The law taught personal responsibility. If you messed up, you had to make it right some way, and selling yourself as a slave was part of it. But for no more than 6 years. It says, he shall serve you 6 years. That really means no more than 6 years. Could be 1 year, could be 6, but no more than 6, then you were set free. Slavery was not a permanent condition as it was in most parts of the world. It was a limited term employment. They fed you and gave you clothing, and you just worked for them. You could sell yourself for a year, 6 years, whatever was required. When you left, don't just say, there's the door, hit the road, like some people let out of prison. There's the clothes you wore in, put them back on, there's the door. Hope you got somebody to call. It wasn't that. When you let him go free from you, you shall not let him go empty-handed. You shall furnish him liberally out of your flock, out of your threshing floor, out of your winepress. As the Lord your God has blessed you, you shall give to him. Don't send him off empty-handed. Send him with his hands full so that he can restore his life and he can begin life anew. Treat him right. Treat him like a fellow child of God. That's what he is. It's an honor system. Did you notice that? He didn't say, if they served you 6 years, give him 2 sheep and a goat. He said, you give him what's right, what's fair. Give it to him liberally. Someone served 6 years, served well. We hope we get more than someone who served 1 year and was just sort of a lazy jerk while they did it. So, but God's honor system, that's how it should work. God will bless you if you do the right thing. Here's something else Exodus 21 tells us about. It's the rules for the sale of a daughter. And we think, who would sell their daughter? I'm sorry, Hannah, you've got to take one for the team. We've got to sell you. Our debt is too great. Oh my goodness, that's horrific. That kind of thing was common in the ancient world. The word used here is for a concubine / housekeeper. Could be either one. You could be just like a servant in the household, just working in the kitchen. Many times that girl would be a concubine. That could be anything from really the wife. If there was no dowried wife, she would be the wife of the family with all the status that goes with that. Or she could just be a housekeeper with benefits. Just a whole range of possibilities there. And we think that's just terrible. But God's point is, this is God's girl. This is not your girl. You must treat her with respect. In particular, rules were given for that. Did I make a slide of that? I'm not moving here, so nope, I didn't make a slide for it. It's in Exodus 21. If a girl is sold, never forget she's God's girl. Number one, if you buy a girl and make her your concubine, your wife, then if you marry a dowried wife, after that, you can't treat this girl you bought with disrespect. You can't send her off. You owe her the status of a wife in terms of food and raiment and conjugal rights. And she may not be real crazy about conjugal rights with you at this point. But the point was, she has the right to have children, and you don't deny her that right. That's the first rule for that kind of a situation. She couldn't be abandoned and sent to the fields to work. She has the right to children, permanent care, that kind of status in the household. People bought daughters of other men for their sons. Maybe your son was really not on the ball or something. You said, I'm going to buy him a wife and buy a girl for him. But if she didn't please him, Exodus 21 says, maybe she just had a sharp tongue, she was just hateful, or for some reason just he didn't like her, he could not sell her to a foreigner. Before she is yours, she is God's. And God says she doesn't go outside the safety of his community. That's what he said. A fellow Jew could purchase her. Many girls in that situation might have wanted someone else to buy her and to enter into a new relationship. He could return her to her father. No refund was allowed. So she had permanent rights. We say that's terrible. It was terrible, but the alternatives were worse. Being sold to a foreigner, a pagan, a Gentile could have entailed we don't know what. Or simply being forced into prostitution. A terrible, degrading life. So this was allowed, but in the Sabbath year, she was set free, unless she chose to stay. Now, the girls were not set free. The men were set free. The girls were not. Okay. We better stop at that point, and we'll finish a couple of things on the Sabbath year, then we'll go ahead with the Jubilee year and what that means for us as Christians. We'll do that next week. Thanks.